ASUS's ROG Strix is the last of the major 1080 Ti's for us to review, and we're introducing brand new charts that normalize noise levels, so to speak. The Strix is another of the 3-fan design cards, supported by 2 large aluminum fin stacks that are split by 6 heat pipes. The cooler doesn't go as crazy with engineering as EVGA's new ICX design, but as we learn in this review, it does just fine with what ASUS has laid out on the table. Before that, this content is brought to you by custom backplate makers V1Tech.com. V1Tech builds GPU backplates to order with their online customization tool, making it easy to theme upcoming PC builds. Backplates cost $25 and up and are installed via magnet and can be seen in some shots of the cards we're reviewing lately. Use code GAMERSNEXUS5 for $5 off your order or click the link below. The ASUS Strix ROG card, the 1080 Ti right here, is one of the last ones we're looking at anytime soon from the 1080 Ti family. This is among the highest end 1080 Ti's we've looked at, alongside the FTW3 from EVGA. Both of those are $780, so they compete directly with each other. And they're also both 3-fan coolers, with the exception being really just the expansion slot requirement. ASUS's card is clocked at 1708 MHz boost when OC mode is used, or 1683 MHz boost when gaming mode is used. But because of how Boost 3.0 works, that doesn't really mean a whole lot. It'll just kind of do whatever it feels like based on thermal and power budget. So ultimately, what we've learned with all of these cards, as we've known for a while now with Pascal, is that they perform pretty much identically. Ultimately, it's still a GTX 1080 Ti under the hood, regardless of what's going on with the PCB and the cooler. That means that we really care about thermals and about noise. So we've introduced a new chart that sort of normalizes for a 40 dBA output. That'll be pretty fun to look at. And there will be no gaming results in this one. You can check the article below if you really want those. But they're basically the same as every other 1080 Ti that we've reviewed, aside from maybe the FE version where it gets a bit hot because of the cooler design. So this one is a Strix card. It's got a backplate, it's got 3-fan cooler, we'll go over in a second. One final thing to point out before getting to the cooler: the GeForce GTX branding on this one is the smallest out of all the ones we've seen so far, and there's a reason for that. NVIDIA is requiring the words GeForce GTX to appear on the 1080 Ti's as far as we know for this round of cards, and ASUS has dealt with that in a clever way. They've put a sticker on it that says 1080 Ti, and you can peel it off if you want to. So worth shouting that out, I guess, because they're the only ones who figured it out. The ASUS Strix cooler is fairly straightforward. The base plate covers only key areas like the VRAM, with the right half of the cooler taking care of the VRM components directly. The base plate is secured by several screws on the top side of the PCB, rather than using screws only in the back half of the card like most vendors do. 6 total heat pipes are in the cooler, each 6 millimeters in diameter, and route through both halves of the heatsink. Straight fins are used in the heatsink, with no fancy L-shaped fins like in the ICX design, and those fins make contact via thermal pad to the core components. Common misconception is that this doesn't provide enough surface area for contact, but we've proven before that even straight fin contact is a significant improvement over no contact. As for the PCB, ASUS uses the same voltage controller as NVIDIA's Founders Edition cards, driving a doubled 5-phase VRM for an effective 10-phase design using International Rectifier 355 60-amp power stages. And for other small notes on the board, it's got 2 fan headers on the far right side, along with an RGB header naturally that will allow you to sync with other RGB ASUS type devices. So diving straight into this one, the testing methodology, as always, will be linked in the description below. We define how we use, or how we obtain, measurements of the power components, of the VRAM components, because this doesn't have sensors like the ICX cards do. So we do it with our own hardware, our own measurement devices. That's all down there. Gaming results will be in the article. Overclocking, although unexciting across all these cards so far, will also be in the article. But really, just I want to drive home, the focus is on thermals and noise once you get to this level of card. There's not a whole lot of difference in gaming. We're talking a couple percentage points, and a lot of the time, even that is kind of mixed. We can't really confidently state one's better than the other unless it's a large enough gap, because the difference in just chip-to-chip quality from NVIDIA directly to these board partners is enough where I could test 10 of these cards and they would have a spread of a couple of percent. So not really too much exciting in the gaming department. They all perform like a 1080 Ti is the basics of it. Our first chart is a simple one. We're plotting temperature and frequency under a power virus scenario here, which helps better understand thermal performance, fan performance, and frequency performance under a VRM torture scenario. This means that we're also not maximizing the clock, so it's being enumerated in a different way. In gaming scenarios, you get a higher clock but lower power draw. As the GPU approaches 55 to 60 Celsius, the stock profile dictates that the fan kicks in at that point and starts ramping up to match temperature. GPU frequency fluctuates more heavily with this card than with the FTW3, and we can kind of slide that chart onto the screen as well. We saw a frequency range of approximately 62 MHz on the FTW3 and a range of about 152 MHz on the Strix, range meaning the actual definition as in top to bottom range of fluctuation. Some of this can be credited to chip-to-chip manufacturing tolerances and variants. We don't have a large enough sample size of these Strix to be sure, but both FTW3s perform the same way. Regardless, the card's temperature target seems to be 65 Celsius, at which point the fans are spinning at 1400 RPM on our bench. We'll look at fixed noise temperature performance in a bit. Moving on, our next chart shows individual component temperatures just for the 1080 Ti Strix card when under auto cooling conditions. We measure the power components around the center of the VRM, as that's the hottest location. The MOSFET temperature reading spits out at around 68 to 69 Celsius, which is well within any reasonable MOSFET spec. Most FETs can take 125C and beyond, so this one's really no problem at all. So far, we're cooler than the Gigabyte Xtreme power components. VRAM is somewhat warm on the ASUS Strix comparatively, but still well within spec. We're looking at 85 to 87 Celsius for the hottest VRM module, sandwiched between the GPU and the capacitor bank for the VRM. Let's move on to some comparative benchmarks. This first chart shows GPU diode and power component temperatures with auto settings. We'll look at fixed 40 dBA tests next. The ASUS 1080 Ti ROG Strix card targets a 65 Celsius GPU diode temperature, putting it nearly equal with the EVGA FTW3 66 Celsius target, and cooler than the SE2, cooler than the Gigabyte Xtreme by a considerable 7C, and cooler than the Gaming X by a few degrees as well. Looking at power component temperatures, the EVGA's FTW3 still reigns king in this department, entirely thanks to its overbuilt heatsink, VRM, and asynchronous fans, with ASUS landing middle of the pack. The only real takeaway here is that Gigabyte's card is the least impressive when looking at out-of-box thermals, and the cooler happens to be the biggest. So here's the new 40 dBA test. It's coming up in a moment. Quick disclaimer though, a lot of people requested this. Thank you for the suggestion. It was a great idea. There are some challenges with this testing though, which is why it takes a while to implement. One of those is specific to EVGA, because the other board partners aren't doing this asynchronous fan thing yet, at least not in any serious capacity. So we have to figure out with EVGA's cards, how do we achieve 40 decibels of output? Because we can control all three fans. The card will sort of auto-control to a point of offsetting the power and the memory fans by maybe 1 to 200 RPM, meaning that they are 1 to 200 RPM different from the GPU fan RPM. We ended up sticking with that sort of proportion where we offset the GPU power and memory fans by an equivalent amount to what EVGA was doing stock out of the box. That doesn't mean it's the best configuration though. EVGA's out-of-box config is pretty aggressive. It's a bit louder when it's left alone, and it doesn't need to be. So you could really play around with the thing for a long time and find the exact perfect mixture of fan speed on all three fans to get 40 dBA and good cooling. It's not that easy to do, unfortunately, so keep that in mind. EVGA's performance will depend very heavily on how you configure the three fans. I think we did what we did. We did a 54% on the GPU and 40 on the power and the memory, but if you go up more on the memory, lower on the power, meet in the middle on the GPU, then you might end up with better performance than we're seeing in terms of temperatures. It's just there's a whole lot of stuff to play with. But the other cards are pretty easy. Find the decibel output, set the fan to that percentage, and let it go. Gigabyte's still being added to this one. We only have the GPU temperatures right now, but the other three have all been run through. With fan speeds configured to a fixed 40 dBA output, we finally start to see some distinction between these AIB partner cards. We configured EVGA again to run at 54, 40, and 40% for the three fan speeds. That's GPM in order. The other cards are all or nothing for their fan speeds, making them easier. ASUS is impressive here. The ROG Strix runs cooler on the GPU, producing a 31.4 Celsius delta T over ambient value, which means we've adjusted it for ambient. and that's a full 6 Celsius cooler than the next closest card, the Gaming X, which has generally been one of the quietest cards on our bench. That card has now been dethroned by ASUS, and next the Gigabyte Xtreme Aorus, which doesn't look all that great when tested at stock speeds, is running 40.7 Celsius Delta T, with the FTW3 last, but again, it's the most difficult to configure, so you could get these temperatures lower and sacrifice other component temperatures if so desired. It's just a matter of how many hours you want to put into it. Power temperatures measured on the middle MOSFET, offset up from the middle, land the Strix again at the lead with a 35.4 Celsius Delta T measurement. EVGA's FTW3 is the #1 coolest for VRM components when all cards are configured auto, but loses ground to ASUS here when we configure the 40 dBA output. And that's a 40.4 Celsius Delta T value, with MSI trailing at 42.1 Celsius Delta T. Finally, the VRAM module between the GPU and the VRM, which tends to be the hottest, measures at 52.7 Celsius Delta T on the Strix card, where EVGA runs 56.6 temperature on the VRAM module, trailed by MSI at 57.9 Celsius. With these noise equalized tests, ASUS is the clear winner here. They have the best temperatures all around the board. The only MSI, we know where they're performing, pretty easy to test. Gigabyte, we know their GPU temperature, need to run the FETs and the VRAM. EVGA is hard because, again, any one of those three temperatures you could bring way down at the cost of pushing some of the other ones up a little bit. So it just depends on how much you're willing to trade. Power could go up, GPU could go down, and vice versa. But that's a start to our new charts. It's pretty cool stuff. I'm excited to add more to it. These are the kind of charts that really only work when we have a whole bunch of one type of GPU, like GPU 102 or what have you, because of the kind of chart it is. I mean, ultimately you're comparing coolers, not GPUs. We might try and play around with it for other things, but this was the debut, so let us know what you think. Let's look at our older noise chart. Under idle conditions, the Strix makes no noise, and we see our noise floor of the test environment. The Strix card's fans spin down when under no load, as do the fans of the SC2 FTW3 with BIOS 2, Gaming X, and Xtreme Aorus. When left to their own devices auto, the Strix is the second quietest card, with the Gaming X holding on to the quietest rank, as it has done the entire time of, well, actually all of our recent GPU tests. The Strix pushes about 38.6 dBA when under auto fan curves, so it's spinning slower than in the aforementioned 40 dBA test. This plants it roughly tied with the Xtreme Aorus and perceptibly quieter than the FTW3 card with auto fan speeds. To be fair to EVGA though, the FTW3 is a dual slot card. Not many others can say that at this time. At 50% fan speeds, the 1080 Ti Xtreme and Gaming X cards are roughly tied, as are the Strix FTW3 and FE cards with a gap between. All three of the latter are noticeably louder than the Xtreme and Gaming X. The SC2 is more than 2 times louder than the Gaming X in perceived noise output, as this is a logarithmic scale. This number isn't all that useful though, since you're either running coolers under auto conditions or under fixed fan curves, which our new 40 dBA test sort of accounts for. We also have a chart with noise at 100%, just to provide perspective. Your fans will never realistically reach a 100% fan speed, as the cards would rather sacrifice frequency than push decibel levels this high. That's true for all of these. At 100% speeds though, nonetheless, the Strix is among the loudest 3 cards on the bench, including the SC2 and Titan XP. All this really means is that ASUS allows its fans to go faster than others, combined with acoustics of the cooling solution. Let's flash back to that auto test for noise. If you're using the card out of box with no changes whatsoever, this is the test that you should pay attention to and the acoustics you should expect. ASUS has one of the most efficient coolers we've tested thus far, shown by thermal performance overall and by the 40 dBA normalized charts, but it does have quite a bit of competition, particularly from MSI and the Gaming X, which is a tall cooler with big fans. Again, like the FTW3, it's hard to justify a $780 purchase for one of these types of cards if it doesn't offer anything you care about. And ultimately, gaming performance for all of them, pretty much the same. So if that's all you care about, as long as it's not a thermally limited card like an FE card or a similar design, then you can really buy any of the ones we've reviewed so far. When it comes to thermals and noise, that's where there's distinction between the devices. So not too much, to be fair. They're all fairly close when auto. Once we start controlling for 40 dBA, this one's looking pretty damn good, but it's also, again, $780. And you could tune the FTW3 to your heart's content if you wanted to spend all day on it. It's got all those sensors on it. It's definitely an enthusiast toy. Also, $780. So we look to the $50 bracket, the 750 point, and the SC2, the Gaming X, the Extreme Aorus are all around that point. The Extreme Aorus, as we review more of these cards, looks like the less favorable purchase, to be nice to it. The Gaming X and the SC2, however, are much more competitive directly with each other and with the other devices. They're $750, not $780, and they will make the majority of users perfectly happy, as would, to be fair, the $720 version of the 1080 Ti. Once you get to $700, you have to be careful what you buy. There are some pretty bad cards at that price point. We might have content on them, I'm not really sure. The FE card has a great PCB, but it's an FE cooler. So unless you're gonna mod it, it's really not ideal for thermal performance, which restricts your frequency performance, which restricts your frame rate something like 6 to 11% depending on the game. So really what you're looking at from our tests is if you do not care specifically about something this offers, buy a $750 card, $720 to $750, and call it a day and be happy with it. If you like the noise performance we're seeing out of this, particularly at the 40 dBA point, it's a pretty damn competitive buy. The FTW3 is less easy to justify at this point than it was even before, and the SC2 still is a strong contender at $750 and is one of our go-tos just because it's got all those ICX sensors on it, which frankly are a lot of fun to play with, even though they might not provide a whole lot of functional value to you. It's just kind of a neat thing to look at, which when you're spending that much money, that's half of the battle anyway. So that's the Strix. It's a good card. Just again, 30 bucks more. Do you want to spend it? Not everyone needs to. Most people, in fact, don't need to. So keep that in mind. Thank you for watching. As always, you can go to patreon.com/gamersnexus if you'd like to get a preview of the new types of charts. I posted a teaser of this one before we went live with the review. And you can go to store.gamersnexus.net to grab shirts. We have some tri-blends that are almost out of stock thanks to all of you. Review is at gamersnexus.net. I'll see you all next time.